Welcome to the Nurturing Fathers Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men succeed at the most challenging and rewarding job they'll ever have, being a dad. Your hosts are Mark Perlman, the creator and founder of the Nurturing Fathers program, and his son, Corey Perlman, who facilitates the program at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and is also a father of 2 young children. It's time to add tools to your Nurturing Fathers toolbox. Mark and Corey, take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nurturing Fathers podcast. My name is Corey Perlman, and as always, I'm here with my dad, Mark Perlman. Dad, are you there?
I am certainly here. Very thrilled to be here.
Glad to have you. And we have a special guest with us today. I'm super excited about it. This is a good friend of mine who's a fellow speaker who I've known over the last few years from the National Speakers Association, as well as a couple of Facebook groups that we're in. His name is Alan Stein Jr. And Alan travels around the world and does a lot of speaking. Just launched his latest and greatest book called Raise Your Game. One of the things that I've really impressed with about Alan and Dad, being a basketball fan, as I know you are, he's literally basically hung out with the who's who of the NBA. I mean, you're talking Kobe Bryant, you're talking LeBron, he's got everybody on here, Kevin Durant, so on and so forth, that he has, worked with, coached, whatever the case may be. And you can tell us a little bit more about that, Alan, as we get into your story. But he now travels the planet as a motivational and inspirational speaker. And the last thing I just want to mention before I let you jump in, Alan, is that one of the coolest things about your world and your bio is that you have a quote that is on the halls or the locker room of Penn State, which is near and dear to my family's heart. And it says, "Are the habits you have today on par with the dreams you have for tomorrow?" And that's featured in the Penn State Football Training Center, which is really cool. So Alan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, man, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be a fun conversation. And fatherhood and parenting and all of this stuff is something I'm incredibly passionate about, but don't really get an opportunity to talk about a lot because most people do want to talk about the hoops background and or the current track I'm on. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
We're starting to broaden the conversation so more men will be talking about fathering and parenting since so many of us are doing it with a real gusto.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this isn't a sneak attack on you, Alan, to start talking about, the other stuff. We will talk about the thing that's probably most important in your life, which are your kids. So why don't you tell us a little bit, just to start us off, about your family, especially your children?
Sure. And one of the cool things is we can still touch on all of that stuff because you'll see that my parenting philosophy is in tremendous alignment with my coaching philosophy, and that the way that I used to train players and or even the things that I share with businesses today is very much in alignment with the way that I want to instill and model certain behaviors with my own children. So all of this
something
stuff
you'll love, Alan, is one of the core pieces of Nurturing Fathers, which we won't talk about too much now, but is when I wanted to try and put the disciplinary piece together, what I came up with is the model of team sports. And basically looking at team sports and the way they play it and the way people win and teamwork and so on. And I modeled the entire disciplinary presentation on team sports. So it'll be near and dear to your heart.
Oh, it most certainly will. That's really cool. And really, in theory, without trying to sound too cliche or over dramatic, a family is a team. It's an organization. It's no different than a business or a sport team as far as some of the foundational principles. Now, obviously, there's a certain level of unconditional love and intimacy with a direct family that might be a little bit different than with a business or organization. But for the most part, these things are very, very much the same. And as Corey knows, and as your listeners will start to learn, I'm a very simple guy. And I don't say that to diminish myself. I'm not a dummy by any means, but I live my life by a very small handful of basic principles. And I use those to guide the decisions I make as a father, as a business owner, as a coach, as a speaker. And I found that simplicity works really, really well. I try not to overcomplicate parenting because, as you guys know, raising kids is already hard enough.
That's the truth.
And one of the things that makes it certainly more challenging is when the family that we all imagined would be intact forever and kind of signed on with marriage vows and everything else at some point begins to sort of come apart, and divorce begins to loom as a part of the trajectory of our family life. And certainly one of the things we think about, and I know I did because I did get divorced once, and Corey shared that experience with me as my child, is what is this going to mean for me, for the children, for the future? Just a whole lot that looked settled and pretty much in focus now really needs to be reexamined and reconsidered.
No, most certainly. And that's part of my journey that I'm always very open about sharing. I mean, statistically, half of the people listening to this have been or will go through a divorce. I mean, certainly I don't wish that upon anyone, but that's the math. And, I've been very, very thankful and very fortunate to be able to navigate a very amicable divorce with my ex-wife. And I always say that very proudly because, now that I'm back out in the dating world and I'm meeting a lot of divorcees, I realize that amicable and divorce are very rarely said in the same sentence. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that ours is that my ex and I, we make excellent co-parents for our children. We've built a friendship, that was different than when we were married, but it's a friendship now that because we know that we're always going to be, bonded with each other because of the 3 kids that we brought into this world. And thankfully that she views things very similar that I do, that the way that her and I treat each other is going to model a lot for our children. And, I won't speak for her, but I'll speak for myself. The way I treat her is going to show my 2 sons the way that a woman should be treated. And the way that I treat her is going to show my daughter how a man should treat you. And, with all these things that have happened, with the Me Too movement and all of these things that have happened, been publicized over the last couple years, it's even more important now that I teach my children the right way to behave and how to behave in a respectful manner. Yeah.
And the role modeling that you're describing is the most powerful teacher because they learn more by what they observe and what we do, dad and mom, more than even what we say. And, one of the hardships of divorce, as you said, Alan, 50%, is that the conflict level between the parents is high. And that's the most common thing. And you two are blessed and wise to be able to have gone through that process without an excessive amount of that. The amicable divorce is ideal from the parents' point of view, but definitely from the children. If we're going to look at any pointer that makes a difference in how children recover and thrive from a traumatic situation, the amicable relationship with the parents would probably be number 1 on my list. And it's a very hard thing to pull off. You guys did it early. My hope is that the parents who experience conflict, with so many do, can end up on the amicable side. That's the key. There's so many hurt feelings, disappointment, grief that goes with divorce. I understand how conflict and anger are part of it, but they're not meant to be permanent situations. And if they are, our children are the ones who really, I think, stand to lose the most with that.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned that there's so much symmetry between my coaching philosophy and my parenting philosophy, I was taught as a coach at a very young age as a coach by a really influential mentor that the coaching mantra is, it's not about me, it's about you. Like that's what every coach should be able to say to their team or to their players or those that they work with. And, funny enough, I mean, that's my feeling when I'm on stage. When I'm on stage, it's not about me, it's about the audience. And the reason I bring that up is that really was my guiding pillar going through the divorce was it's not about me, it's about my kids. And yes, there were times where I felt hurt, where I was angry, where I was upset, where I felt like lashing out, where I, maybe did not feel like being as respectful to her as maybe she deserved. But I was able to always take the high road because I would step back and look in the mirror and go, okay, the decision I'm about to make is not just for me, it's going to impact my children. And I have to take the high road because none of this is their fault. And that discipline to be able to do that oftentimes was not easy. And I know it wasn't easy for her either, but I'm so thankful that both of us always chose that route and we could model that. And, it's funny, it's kind of bittersweet now. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't see my kids where they don't say something to the effect of, why can't you move back home with mommy because you guys are such good friends now? Like we get along so well that they're kind of confused on why we don't get married again, which we've explained to them in language they understand at their age. But what an awesome problem to have.
Absolutely. And that is also a fantasy of every child of divorce is maybe someday mom and dad will get back together again. And because, as you so wisely said, this is not of their choice. This is something that happened to them. It's an adult choice, and one that I'm sure needed to be made, as it does for so many people. But for the kids, it's something that happened to them, and they were never prepared. You can't be prepared for that reality of mom and dad living in separate places, and the family and life that we knew and counted on with a sense of permanency would come apart. So what have you noticed, and what did you notice about your kids early on in the process? One of the nicest things that you've said to me so far that touches me deeply is how your attention was on them. Because what happens so often, and I don't say this with blame, it's just the nature of the craziness of divorce, is that mom and dad are so filled with emotion, legal issues, financial issues, that they are wrapped up in themselves and their own pain and the change. And unfortunately, sometimes the kids are not noticed. And they're going through their own version of incredible disruption and change. So what did you notice with your kids, or what kind of were some of the guiding principles or experiences, Alan?
Well, when we decided to go the route of divorce, and so I'm 43 years old right now, been divorced this August will be 4 years, and I moved out the year prior to start the separation. So with my kids being 9 and 7, they were very young at the time. So part of us going through our divorce, we went in for some couples counseling, and then I chose to stay to get some individual therapy and counseling for a year or two after. And we certainly leaned on our therapist as far as what's the proper way to talk to our children about divorce based on their age. Like, what things should we share with them? What questions should we expect? So this was not anything that, her and I had experience with. I mean, this was the first marriage for both of us. We got married very, very quickly. We had twin sons very, very quickly. And then that's when we kind of woke up after this whirlwind and realized we weren't a real good fit for each other. And I will say that I think one of the things that made it easier for our divorce to be amicable was we both came to the realization that we weren't a great fit. There was no infidelity, there was no abuse, there was no some of these other things that I can't even fathom how much more pain and hurt that would cause someone. So with us both being able to look at each other and go, okay, we kind of rushed into this. Probably wasn't the best decision we made, but we did make it. So now let's find out how we can resolve this in the best manner possible. But with the kids being younger and not fully understanding everything, and then being able to take the guidance of a trained, medical professional, a therapist or a counselor, to be able to guide us through that certainly helped. And, I know for me, my parents have been happily married for 44 years. Her parents have been happily married for almost 50. So divorce was not normal for either one of us. And one of the things I learned very quickly was that there really is no normal in any walk of life. What I consider normal, you two may consider abnormal, and that's okay. So part of me, I was having so much guilt in thinking that I had failed at something that, my parents were able to do for 44 years, and that, and I had this guilt and this shame involved. And once I was able to get rid of that and just say, hey, there is no normal, that normal is going to be whatever we make it. And I don't need the guilt of thinking that my kids are not going to have a normal nuclear family, because that's okay. We can still provide them with unconditional love and support as co-parents, and this will be their normal. So all of those things kind of wrapped up, I think, made the process much more manageable for us.
Yeah. Just focusing on the kids a little more specifically, if we will, what was your concern for them in this process, and perhaps with the help of the therapist, or what did they show you that was, cause for pause or concern that they were struggling? Just some examples, if you will, of how kids are affected and how you perhaps addressed that, or your spouse did.
Well, the key was for us to just to be open about why we were going through this. And, we didn't really use the word divorce as much, because we were told that, especially with young kids, that word can often be a trigger that, if, they're in first grade and they hear one of their friends' parents got divorced and their friends' parents hates each other and they never see their dad, then when they hear that word, they're going to assume that that's what our divorce is going to be like. So we framed it more of, mommy and daddy get along better when we live in separate houses. And that's what we'll have now, that we're going to have separate houses, but we're always going to be your mom and dad. That will never change. We will always love you. That will never change. But some of kind of the the logistics and semantics of the way things were, those are going to change. But we are both going to be incredibly present in your life, and that we're both going to get along. That, this isn't anything where if her and I are in the same room that, tensions are going to be raised and everyone's on eggshells. Things are just going to be different. And we would constantly share with them that, different does not mean bad. Different does not mean worse. Different just means different. And, we were always very open for the kids to ask any questions. My daughter was so young at the time that there really wasn't much that she could comprehend. But, my sons they asked lots of very intelligent questions. And, we never forced them to sit down and have this talk. It was just, if there's ever something you're more comfortable talking to mommy about, please do. If there's something you're more comfortable talking to me about, I'm always here and open. If there's ever a time that you want to talk to both of us, that no question is an inappropriate question. No question is a dumb or silly question. And then we've always both been very transparent that we don't have all the answers. I don't BS my children, and I never will. If they ask me something that I don't know, I simply tell them I don't know. And if it's something I can find the answer to and get back to them, then I will. But we never just made things up. And we certainly, we didn't try to paint this perfect picture and make, we wanted to let the kids know that, yeah, this was still a hard process and that mommy and daddy were, having difficulty navigating this, and we're going to learn as we go. And that's, and many times, the way that life works. But the most important part was letting them know that we will both be very present in their lives and we will always love them. Those two things will never change. And I think that helped give them some security.
That's the security replacement that they feel that they've lost. So I think you guys, your inclinations, your ability to sort of do this is somewhat remarkable. What we're presenting here is an ideal picture in some ways, although I know you don't like to see it that way. But from my experience, personally, having gone through it, it's a little more sloppy around the edges at times, but also seeing so many other people and knowing the statistics, it rarely is as smooth as that. But the point is, for all the reasons you said, you were able to put your best feet forward. So what we're seeing here is really what people need to aspire to, that any temptation to speak negatively about the other parent needs to be thwarted, because the worst thing for a child to hear is for one parent, mom or dad, to speak negatively and put down the other parent, because they know that they're connected to both of those people and they carry parts of both those people. So when we put down mom, that is basically criticizing and tearing our children or our daughter right in the center of who she is, what she knows she's connected to. So the ability to at least be neutral, not criticize the other parent, and basically try and calm and quiet any inclination to do so will come up is incredibly important for the children, because that stuff once said, especially if it's said over and over again, can really create some damage and some longer lasting trauma. What you guys have done and what you're describing, Alan, is going through a really traumatic experience like this, which it is. It's nothing less than that. In fact, some people liken divorce as more difficult than death, because it involves a loss of family, loss of this other person, but they're still around and we all need to deal with each other. So in some ways it's more complicated, but it is a loss and it is a grieving process. And you've given your children a tremendous foundation for not only recovering from it, but I think thriving in the face of that difficult life experience.
Well, I appreciate it. And I hope so. And, and a lot of this, we were so thankful to have a therapist kind of hold our hand and guide us through this. And basically what you just said, almost verbatim, is what she constantly reminded us of during weekly therapy sessions, was the allure and tendency to badmouth the other is going to be there, especially when things are still raw and the divorce, the paint hasn't settled on this thing yet. But you have to remember that even what you think is the most innocuous little comment could really do some damage to the kids. And I would imagine, I don't know because I'm not the product of divorce, but I would imagine that one of the toughest situations you could ever put children in would be this feeling that they have to choose or pick sides or anything like that. And I think when you say something disparaging about your ex, that's what you're asking them to do unconsciously. You're asking them to either agree with you that, yeah, that is true, or you're asking them to step up and say, no, dad, you shouldn't say that. Mom's not that way. Either way, you're getting them to momentarily have to pick a side. And, as adults, that's just not fair to do with children. And, I'm probably painting this to seem as if it went much easier than it was. I guess now that we've both kind of, moved past that one phase and we look back. But I mean, I remember there were definitely some tense and some painful and tough times. But yeah, we collectively were able to work through it. And, I will say that the big hurdle we have not had to go over yet, even though we've been divorced for 4 years, I've dated here and there, but I've never had a serious significant other yet. So no one has met my children yet. And
Right.
same thing on her end. So we realized that will be the next big thing, that eventually one of us will meet, hopefully our next partner, and someone else will be brought into this mix. And, there'll be a good chance that person has children also. So it's funny that, we don't really talk a whole lot about dating with the kids. I mean, they're always open to ask me anything they want, but some of those questions have started to surface lately based on some of their friends who have parents that are divorced and now have step parents and so forth. They're asking me, well, what if I fall in love with someone that doesn't like us? That's a question they ask, and all of these different things. And so far we've been able to have some really nice, intimate, healthy conversations about it. But I know that will be harder for all of us, when you're bringing somebody new to Christmas dinner around everybody else. So
right.
We're not out of the woods yet, but I feel very secure that we've got the tools to do it the right way and navigate those things when it's appropriate.
Yeah. Well, let me also just say it's a lot harder if it's a matter of weeks or even months than it is a matter of years. And you guys, for whatever reason, but once again, we're able to wait quite a long time. And there's so much else to take care of, and there's so much else to heal. And I think healing is part of the natural process. Time does help heal, but also if we can rise as parents to the level of trying to see and take care of our children's needs, that facilitates the healing. But that all takes time, and you've given it time. So I think it's a lot more difficult when that new person comes in almost immediately, and nobody has to argue the point that, yes, that's going to be more difficult for the children. So.
Hey, Dad.
Corey, yeah.
Yeah, is it cool if I ask a question? Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I forgot about you, Corey.
Yeah, it's okay.
Alan and I are on a roll here, man.
You guys are on a roll, and you're doing great, and I'm loving just listening to it. But I just have a quick question for you, Alan, specifically to how you navigate keeping the bond strong with your kids. I would like to know a little bit about how the relationship is in terms of when you get your time with them, and then how you're intentional about making sure that bond stays as strong, theoretically, that half of the time that you would have normally spent with them, has been taken away, so to speak. So can you talk to a little bit about that?
Sure. So at present, we have 50-50 custody, custodial and legal. The kids technically live with her, and they're in Bethesda, Maryland, and I live in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm 12 to 15 minutes away, so fairly close. But the home that we lived in is where they stayed, and the schools that they go to are a little bit better than where I moved into an apartment. And I have the kids every Tuesday and Wednesday. I pick them up from school. And then because of the DC traffic, I live 15 minutes north of where they live, which means in the morning, getting them to school, it's a nightmare. It could take 45 minutes to an hour to make that normally 15-minute drive. So we've decided that during the school year on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, they do not spend the night with me. I pick them up from school around 3:30, depending on, sometimes we stay after and play at the playground, then we do some homework, then I make dinner. And then I take them home around 7 to 7:30 so that they spend the night there. And then I have them every other weekend. When I have them on the weekends, I pick them up Friday from school and drop them off after dinner on Sunday. Occasionally, we have to switch days, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Corey, with the speaking schedule, which sometimes can be up and down. But this is, again, where I'm so thankful that my ex and I get along, and that she's very supportive of what I do, and that she's okay to switch days. If I get a keynote, talk somewhere on a Tuesday and I can't have them on that Tuesday, then we can switch days, or I'll try to make up for it later. So that part's been very helpful. And of course, even before I got into the corporate speaking, I was traveling a ton for basketball. So one of the things that's nice, I guess is my travel schedule has been around longer than the kids have. So this is something that's always been their quote unquote normal. So it's not like all of a sudden I just started traveling, and they've been used to not seeing me for 2 or 3 days in a row and then coming home. So that also made the transition a little bit easier.
With the 50-50 custody, you must be a master of scheduling.
I have to plan everything in advance, but as a professional speaker, I already have to do that. And this will sound really, really weird. I would imagine some other divorced professional speakers could probably chuckle with this, but it almost makes it easier in divorce, because now my life is so compartmentalized that I know that when I have my kids, that I can fully focus on them because I don't need to do any work then, because I can make up for the work on the days that I don't have them. Sometimes I think, building a business or launching a speaking career when you're in the normal nuclear family can actually be harder because, you're home, but then you've got to devote time to your business. Like the gray area always was a challenge for me personally. And now that it's cut and dry, and yes, there are times occasionally where I need to schedule a call or do something when I have my kids, but I do the very best that I can not to schedule anything work-wise on Tuesday and Wednesdays and every other weekend when I have them so that they can get what they deserve, which is my full attention. And sometimes it's a little harder to do, but we've been able to make that work. And her and I we don't nickel and dime each other with the schedule either. If she needs me to keep them later one night because she wants to go out, that's totally fine. If I need to drop them off early one day because I've got something going on, like we work together and we keep this dance going for all the reasons that we've talked about. That's being cordial and being civil and being respectful and treating each other as if we were really good friends is how we want to model our relationship for our kids.
So once again, I would like to say that we've been presented here, and I'm very thankful for it, with a model of divorce and fathering through it that is really something to aspire to, because Alan and his wife managed to pull this off for the reasons he stated. And I think it's a great thing for everybody listening out there who is struggling with this, who has struggled with it, might struggle with it in the future, is to know that this is what it can be, and this is what we want to shoot for in the best we can. It won't always be that way, but if we keep the well-being of the children as a primary philosophy, and we try and not negate or speak bad about our exes, we are on the path to helping our kids recover from this and having full and healthy and happy lives instead of an experience that could drag them down. So it's great, Alan. I really appreciate it. We didn't set out to define this topic in this way, but what a great reference point for people to know that this can be done consciously and gracefully, even with all its pitfalls, and how the children will be better off for it. So thank you, my friend.
No, my pleasure. And one thing, I want to, acknowledge both my parents and her parents because, as direct extensions of us, they've handled this with just as much grace as I'm hoping we have. And, they're still good friends with each other. When I go over and anytime I see her parents who live right next to where she lives, they still treat me with the same warmth as if we were still married. They've been able to try to help keep everything intact also. That one of the things I'm so thankful for, there just isn't any tension when we're all around each other. And yes, things have changed. When my parents come in town, we don't all get together the way that we used to. But when everyone does see each other and stay in touch, it's been nice. And I'm very thankful that, as I mentioned, both of them have been married for 4 and 5 decades. And they were still embracing of the fact that we weren't able to do the same thing. And that's been really supportive.
So, Alan, I want to ask you just one other question specific to kind of pulling out some of these nuggets that I feel like you've provided here for the couple or for the dad that's in the process of divorce or potentially in the thick of it or moving towards it. 2 things I've heard in particular from both of you guys. One is seeking professional help. So, in the form of a counselor, therapist, something to that effect, which sounds like it was very helpful in your journey. And then the other is really being intentional about not speaking negatively about your spouse, which I remember as being a product of a divorced family, something that Dad and I will talk about on a separate podcast where we'll dive into our world of divorce. What other tips or thoughts do you have, strategies, if you will, for the guy that's going through this to try to aspire to the type of divorce that you and your ex had?
Well, for me, trying to adopt the mindset of not looking at things as good or bad or right or wrong, just appreciating that everyone's on their own journey. Everyone has their own biases. Everyone has their own perspective. And, it goes without saying, one of the reasons our marriage didn't work is her and I had very different perspectives on a lot of things that we just weren't able to gel in that way. And that's okay. So at this point, and this is most of the internal work that I had to do is I used to have such an irritating quality of always trying to be right, and that I was an incessant scorekeeper with everything that was going on. And those were very, very toxic and unattractive qualities. And that's what my therapist really helped, shine a light on things that I needed to do to improve as a man, as a father. But one of them now, I let her know, look, if there's anything that I'm doing or not doing that you think I should be doing better as a parent to our children, I very much want you to feel very open to let me know that I will do my best not to get defensive, not to make excuses. I just want you to be very open. And, that takes a little bit of practice, but we're at a point now where, she'll share things with me, as they start to bother her. And a perfect example was a couple weeks ago. I've always been very big into social media. It's always been a major driver, first of my basketball business, now of my speaking business. And she's much more of a private person and doesn't like doing stuff on social. And she had come across an article and something she was reading a couple weeks ago about this new concept called sharenting, where parents are sharing stuff about their kids all of the time and that they don't realize that they're leaving a digital footprint about their kids, and yet their kids don't really have a say in what's being posted. And is that appropriate? And, the only reason I bring that up was she shared that article with me and she said, respectfully, I think you post way too much about our kids. I'd like to have a talk about it. And I said, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, that was something that was bothering you. I had no idea it was bothering you. And yeah, let's take a look and let's have a discussion about it. And we had a very fruitful talk. And, I am posting a lot less about my kids. And anytime that I do post, especially now at their ages, I ask their permission. Hey, Jack, is it cool if I post this picture of you playing basketball? Is this something you're okay with? And if for any reason my kids are not okay with it, then I won't post it. And, so I only bring that up as just an example of the type of relationship that I want to have, because it's not about being right. It's not about what's good or bad. Do I think personally I was posting too many pictures of my kids? I don't think so. That's why I was doing it. But I have to realize that in a relationship, as they say, it takes two to tango. So it doesn't really matter what I think. If she thought I was posting too much, then that has to be something that I listen to, and it has to be something that's important to me. When you're in a relationship, whatever is important to the other person needs to be important to you by default. And I'm glad we were able to have that conversation, and I think we all feel better about it.
Well, the reality of what you're saying is that you guys are no longer married as a couple as you got divorced, but you never get divorced from your kids. You will always be the parent of those three delightful children, and that's the relationship that you're talking about now as co-parents. That goes on for the duration. So why not make it the best possible with the kind of respect and dialogue that you're talking about?
Alan, this has been an unbelievably fruitful conversation that I'm just really, really proud of. So thank you so much for being a part of it with us. Let me just kind of give it to you one more time. Is there anything that you would have liked us to ask, or you would have liked to have brought up on this topic of sort of navigating parenting through a divorce that we didn't ask you, or that you'd like to share?
No, I'm just very thankful to be connected with both of you. I love that this is a platform and something that you guys are openly speaking about. If there's anything that I can do to support it, I would love to be able to do that. I do think, and I'm hoping this is changing over time, I think there are a lot of stigmas attached, not even just with divorce, but especially with males going to therapy. I remember even some of my friends kind of looking at me crooked eye, like, what are you going to go in and talk about your feelings? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to go in and do. Because, right now I'm a ticking time bomb with all sorts of emotions that I don't know what to do with. And yeah, I'm going to get some help. And, the language I use would be therapist or counselor, but the vernacular I'm most comfortable with, she was my coach. Like, she was coaching me through a divorce. She was coaching me on how to improve my own self-awareness, improve, these qualities that were undermining me from being the best man that I could be. And, I'm incredibly grateful for that. So I'm trying to do whatever I can, especially from an emotional intelligence standpoint. I think that's one of the most important roles for me as a father, especially with my sons, not excluding my daughter, but is teaching them the importance of high emotional intelligence, of allowing themselves to be vulnerable, that things like crying is a healthy way to express emotion. It is not a weakness, and because I grew up in sport. I grew up in, suck it up, walk it off, stop crying, quit acting like a girl. And now that I have a daughter, like, how demeaning is that to tell a boy that you're acting like a girl? Like, it's so demeaning. And yet that was the world that I grew up in. And I didn't know there was anything wrong with it until now that I've come out on the other side. So I think giving emotional intelligence to my kids, or modeling it for them, and letting other men know that you choose to have an amicable divorce. You don't control what your spouse does, and they might attack you with venom and toxicity, but you always control how you react to it. And if you want to really be a man, then you need to make sure that you react in the most positive and loving and caring way possible. And I know that that is going to be a very big challenge many of the times because you have hurt and so forth, but it's one that you have to make. And if more men collectively would unite and do this, slowly, I think we'd see the world be a little bit of a better place.
Well, welcome to the Nurturing Fathers family.
Yes. Amen.
You have expressed it beautifully. That's really what we're about. Take the high road, guys. You'll never be led that wrong if you could do your best to take the high road. Thank you so much, Alan. It's delightful. What a deep conversation for our first time ever meeting.
Yes, sir. Feelings very mutual. I appreciate you both.
Alan,
yeah, good luck to you and the family in the future, too. I hope our paths will cross at some point.
They will.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for the energy. Thanks for the time. It's going to be very valuable to a lot of people who are navigating this now or in the future. I'll also provide a link to learn more about Alan in the show notes. And when this does get thrown out there, Alan, I'll make sure to get it to you so you can share it with your world as well. So
I certainly will, proudly.
Thank you again. Dad, thank you as well. And we'll talk to you all on the next episode of the Nurturing Fathers program. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Nurturing Fathers podcast. Have questions or comments? Join the conversation at facebook.com/nurturingfathers or email us at nurturingfathers@gmail.com.